You won't believe what happened to me on such a simple trip to the beach with my grandson's friend. One moment I was just a grandmother wanting to lend a hand, and the next I found myself caught up in an emotional whirlwind I'd never imagined. Have you ever experienced a moment so unexpected that it stirred something inside you? Well, let me tell you, that day completely transformed me. But before I begin, tell me, where are you listening to me from? I love knowing what cities and corners of the world people are coming from. Now, let me take you back to that serene morning. My name is Carmen. I'm 59 years old, a retired former nurse, and a proud grandmother of 4. I live in a windy little town on the seaside of Andalusia, where the salty air still heals the soul like a balm. My oldest grandson, Mateo, is 16. He's a loving boy, a little reserved, but always attentive to his friends. I had a buddy over for a few days. His name was Lucas. A tall, serene, soft-spoken man with tousled brown hair that fell over his forehead and a courtesy that made him stand out from the crowd. Lucas had come once before, but this time I was able to notice him more closely. There was something special about his personality. He wasn't like the other kids. He truly listened when someone was talking. He noticed the small details. He thanked me for every dish with a sincerity that touched my heart. And on the 3rd day of his stay, he came up to me while Mateo was still snoring in his room and blurted out something that completely threw me. "Ms. Carmen, would you mind if we go to the beach this morning? Just us. I need some fresh air." I raised an eyebrow. "Just us?" He nodded with a shy smile. "Mateo is exhausted from last night's video game marathon. I didn't want to wake him." There was nothing flirtatious or out of place in his voice, just an honest vulnerability, as if he were looking for a corner to breathe and perhaps some silent company. I hesitated for a second, and then I heard myself say, "Yes." "Okay, Lucas, give me a moment to put on my hat." We drove in comfortable silence, the wind playing between us on the road to Tarifa Beach. It was early, the sand almost deserted, the kind of peace you only find before the crowds arrive. I parked near the dunes, and we walked side by side, bare feet sinking into the cool sand. The waves came in a gentle ebb and flow, like a constant whisper. At first we didn't say anything, and oddly enough he didn't need to. Lucas seemed lost in thought, his hands in the pockets of his sweatshirt. After a while, I sat on a blanket and watched the horizon as he approached the water's edge, calmly kicking the waves. Eventually he came back, sat next to me, and asked, "Have you always lived near the sea?" I smiled softly. "No, I came here after my husband left us. This place gave me space to breathe again." He nodded. "You can see why." We spent a good while like that, with light conversations that floated between silly anecdotes and deeper reflections. Suddenly he blurted out, "It's funny. She reminds me of someone I used to chat with. A friend of my grandmother's. She took care of me for a while. She left when I was 13. I turned my head to look at him. There was a quiet pain on his face, something pulsing beneath the surface. "I'm sorry," I murmured. "It seems like it was important to you." "It was." He paused. "And so are you, even though I barely know you. Isn't that strange?" I smiled but didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. And then there was that moment. Simple, quiet, indelible. A gust blew my scarf free and I reached up to grasp it. At the same time, his hand reached for mine, first to help, then to stay. Our fingers touched, hesitated, and without a word, his hand engulfed mine. It was tender, not a firm or bold grip, just a touch. I felt a lump in my chest, not of fear or discomfort, but of something softer. Maybe confusion, but also curiosity. I didn't pull away. No one said anything. We just stood there, hand in hand, with the waves singing a soft lullaby behind us. There was no rush, just warmth. My thoughts swirled. What am I doing? He's so young, I am me. But none of it sounded accusatory. They were just questions floating in the silence. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't inappropriate. It was something else. A connection. Perhaps a recognition. Finally, he let go of my hand, stood up, and looked at me with a half smile. "Thanks for coming with me." I nodded, my heart still beating a little faster. On the way back, we didn't talk much, but the silence was different now. Comforting, as if we'd shared a secret that didn't need a name. I didn't tell Mateo. I didn't know how. Not even I fully understood. But that moment stayed with me. Not for what it was, but for what it awakened. Something I thought I'd buried long ago. My ability to be seen, to be touched, to feel. And as I stared at the road, I knew that simple morning on the beach could be the beginning of something unforeseeable. When I got home, Mateo was still asleep, sprawled on the couch with a half-empty bag of cookies on his chest. I smiled to myself and went to the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water to dissipate the strange heat bubbling in my chest. But no matter how much I took a deep breath or started washing dishes, my mind kept returning to that touch. Lucas's hand on mine. Not demanding, not even insinuating, just present, delicate. I told myself it didn't mean anything. I couldn't. I was 59, for God's sake. And him? 18, maybe 19? But the truth is, this wasn't about romance. It was about being noticed, valued in a way I hadn't felt in years. Since my husband left, I'd grown accustomed to a quiet invisibility. People see the kind lady who bakes cakes and sends birthday cards. No one sees me, Carmen, but Lucas does. That afternoon, he came into the kitchen while I was chopping onions. Mateo was lost in his virtual world, and I welcomed the respite. "Do you need a hand?" he said, walking over and picking up a potato as if he'd been with me for years. I smiled. "Are you a better cook than Mateo?" He joked with a mischievous grin, and I laughed more than I expected. He moved naturally around my kitchen, finding utensils without asking. He peeled vegetables while I chopped. We talked about recipes, old songs, and how he missed the torrential rains because his hometown was as dry and flat as a board. In those 40 minutes, I learned more about him than I had all weekend. He told me that his parents separated when he was 9, that his father worked double shifts to get by, that he spent a lot of time alone, teaching himself to read poetry, to play the ukulele, even to mend a torn seam. He said it all without rancor, like someone who has embraced life as it comes. And I just listened, not with pity, but with respect. He had a quiet strength I hadn't expected. When dinner was ready, Mateo came down from his cave, and everything flowed as normal. We ate, laughed at silly things, and for a while the world seemed right. But underneath, I watched, felt, wondered what Lucas had felt when he held my hand, and above all, what I had felt. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I relived the beach in my head, the wind, the footprints in the sand, the pause before our fingers intertwined. I told myself to stop, to grow up, to not confuse affection with seasickness. But I remembered how he looked at me. Not like an old woman, not like his friend's grandmother, just me, Carmen. The next morning I tried to feign normalcy. Coffee, a walk, watering the plants. But when I walked out onto the porch with the watering can, there was Lucas, sitting on the steps with a sketchbook on his knees. "I didn't know you were awake," I said. He looked up and smiled softly. "I didn't sleep much. Is everything okay?" He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, just jumbled thoughts." I almost asked him which ones, but something stopped me. Instead, I sat down next to him, letting the morning sun bathe our legs. He turned the notebook toward me. It was the beach. Not just any beach, that beach. The dunes, the waves, me sitting cross-legged on the blanket, my hat tilted just so. He'd drawn me, not with a master's precision, but with soul, with tenderness. I didn't know what to say. "I hope you don't mind," he murmured, suddenly unsure. I shook my head, my throat tight. "It's beautiful. I drew it last night," he added. I didn't want that moment to be erased. There was a silence then, long, sweet, heavy. He looked at me again, and I felt the touch of a question that no one dared to ask. The echo of something strange, fragile, nameless. "It's not about age," he said softly, as if reading my doubts. "It's that you feel real. That's all." And just like that, something in me snapped open. I didn't reach for his hand. He didn't lean in. There was no need to, because on that quiet morning on the steps, something moved between us. Not toward love, but toward something braver, deeper, a connection I didn't see coming, and I had no idea where it would lead us. The following days passed slowly, with a sweetness like a dream you don't want to end. I didn't say anything to Mateo, of course. What was happening between Lucas and me was inexplicable. Not even to me. It wasn't bad, but it didn't fit neatly into neat boxes. Lucas never forced anything. He never crossed boundaries. He was just there, in my world, in a natural and reassuring way. He helped me water the garden, carried grocery bags without me asking, and played soft melodies on his ukulele in the evening, while Mateo shouted at his console above. I began to look forward to those moments in between with him. Silences filled with understanding, glances that spoke louder than any words. One afternoon, the sky clouded over and the wind picked up. A late summer storm was brewing, and my old knees protested as I stepped out onto the porch to put away the pillows. Lucas was already there, barefoot, sleeves rolled up, stretching for the last one. He smiled at me over his shoulder. "A storm's coming," I nodded. "Have you seen one from the porch swing?" He shook his head. "No, but I don't have any better place." I should have gone in, but I didn't. We sat together as the wind cooled and the first drops of rain fell. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the air smelled of wet earth and salt. Lucas lay back, legs outstretched, head tilted to the sky. "When I was little, I was afraid of storms," he confessed. I looked at him. Most kids are. Yes, but not because of the lightning. It was the silence afterward. That stillness. As if everything had changed, and you couldn't put a name to it. That sentence stuck with me, because it was exactly how I felt now. I turned slightly toward him, tucking one leg under me. "Lucas, can I ask you something?" He looked at me, with that softness in his eyes that always disarmed me. "Sure. Do you sometimes feel like you should be somewhere else? As if life had another script, but you got off at the wrong stop?" He didn't answer immediately. Then he nodded. "All the time. But sometimes I think the wrong stop is exactly where you wanted to end up." We didn't speak again for several minutes. The rain picked up, soaking the steps, darkening the wood. I should have gone inside, but his presence anchored me. Then, slowly, carefully, he reached out and placed his hand gently on my knee. Just a touch, not demanding, not provocative, just a bridge. And this time I didn't let it go. I really looked at him, and I no longer saw a boy. I saw someone who understood what many people my age were still struggling to decipher. Someone who listened more than they spoke. Who chose to stand in the rain with me because it meant something, even if they didn't say it out loud. I placed my hand on his, not as an answer or a promise, but as a silent yes. When the storm passed, we stood up in silence, soaked, and smiling in that strange way that comes when you know you've shared something eternal without words. The next day, everything felt lighter. Mateo made a mess with the pancake batter. Lucas helped clean up, and I found myself humming while I ironed. I couldn't explain it, nor did I want to. Later, Lucas suggested a walk to the pier. Mateo turned him down. "It's hot as hell," he grumbled, already holding a can of soda. So it was just us again, like that morning on the beach. We walked slowly, without much talking, letting the world settle as we walked. The boards creaked beneath our feet. The sun cast long shadows on the railings. At the end of the dock, Lucas leaned on the railing and looked out at the sea. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he said softly. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. "I know. Mateo mentioned it." He turned to me. "I'm glad I came. Not just for him, but for this. For you." I looked up, my heart in my mouth. "He's shown me something I didn't know I needed," he murmured. "And I'm taking it with me." There was nothing to add. Nothing to clarify. I reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. She leaned into my palm as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And for a fleeting heartbeat, there at the edge of the ocean, we just existed. Two people, two souls, two paths crossing in a place neither planned. We walked back in silence. The tide had taken something from me, and I didn't know what would remain when Lucas was gone. But something had changed, and I was finally ready to face it head on. The morning of his departure was quiet. Too quiet, that kind of stillness that envelops you not from peace, but from emptiness. Mateo was in his room, stuffing socks and chargers into a backpack to the sound of muffled music. I stayed in the kitchen with my second cup of coffee, the first already cold on the counter. I stared at the door for no reason, because I wasn't expecting anything, but I didn't know what else to do. There's no right way to say goodbye to something you can't define. Lucas came down with his backpack over his shoulder, wearing the same gray sweatshirt from the beach. He looked like the same guy, but I wasn't sure he was. Mateo followed him, with that morning laziness. "Thanks for everything, Grandma," he said with a quick side hug. "We'll write to you when we get there." Lucas stopped, his eyes meeting mine with a depth that hurt a little. "Can I say goodbye outside?" he asked Mateo. He shrugged. "Sure, I'll go to the car." And suddenly, it was just us again, on the porch steps, with the morning sun filtering through the branches. We didn't speak at first. There was no need to. "I don't know what this was," I said finally, "but it meant something to me." He nodded, taking a step closer. Me too. There was a moment, a sigh, when I thought he might reach out again. But he didn't, and I was grateful, because as beautiful as our bubble had been, he belonged here. I couldn't and shouldn't follow him into his world, nor me into mine. Still, it mattered more than words could possibly say. "I'm glad I met you, Carmen," he said. "I'm glad you saw me," I replied. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just stood there, gazes locked, until he turned and walked toward the car. He glanced back once, a smile barely visible, and was gone. I stayed on the porch long after the car disappeared around the curve. The wind had picked up, just like before the storm. But this time I wasn't preparing for anything. I was just remembering. That afternoon, I went to the beach alone. I wore the same blanket, the same hat, and sat in the same spot. The sand was warm now, the waves gentler. I closed my eyes and let it all come back. Not just the moments with Lucas, but how they had opened a door in me that I thought was closed. A door to feeling, to connecting. It wasn't about ages, rules, or explanations. It was about being seen. And now that it had been seen, it wouldn't return to the shadows. At dusk, with the sky turning gold and the tide rising, I took out a small notebook and began to write. Not for Lucas, not for anyone else. For myself, I wrote about the beach, the swing, the rain, about the hand that held mine just long enough to remind me that it was still alive, still beating. And as the stars twinkled overhead, I realized something profound. Life's most powerful moments don't always end in explosions or fairy tales. Sometimes they only leave a mark, a gentle echo that changes you forever. And that mark, my friends, is what makes me smile today, ready for whatever comes next. And you? What mark has left a lasting impression on you? Tell me, for life is for sharing these stories.